Okay. Well, it's 3 minutes past 2, so I'll kick this off. This is the third in the series of webinars. As I've just mentioned, the subject matter local government reorganisation in Cumbria and North Yorkshire is a little drier than the first two, I suspect, which were on blended working and the landscapes review. But of course, I'll try to sex it up as much as I can, but you may find me struggling in that regard as we work through it. Just a bit of housekeeping, if I can, at the start. Can I just remind everyone, it's really helpful if you complete the short survey at the end of the webinar. It actually appears in the browser when the webinar ends. So if you just hang on for that bit, and then you can give us some feedback on what you felt about this particular webinar. It is, of course, available to view afterwards for those of you that struggle for television on an evening. Okay, let's kick it off then. I put together a few slides just to kind of set out and explain what I think is happening and its impact on the National Park Authority. So I'm just going to share the screen with you to do that, to have a look at those. Okay, so you should be seeing those slides. As I say, we're just going to look at local government reorganisation as it impacts on Cumbria and North Yorkshire, but it's a little wider afield at the moment, which I'll come on to as we work through this. So what is it? Well, essentially what it's about is bringing together into one local authority all the services that are provided by county councils and district councils and borough councils to create one unitary authority. It exists in large parts of England at the moment, ostensibly around the metropolitan and more urbanised areas, but it's increasingly being introduced in other parts of England, particularly where it's coming along with a devolution deal, a local devolution deal, which I'll come on to in a moment. In terms of the current local government reorganisation, it's actually affecting 3 counties: Cumbria, North Yorkshire and Somerset. Don't ask me why. I think it was just that those had got bids in for this particular time. So it's impacting on 4 national park authorities: Exmoor, the Lake District, the North York Moors and ourselves. In terms of timescales, the work on this has been underway for some time now, for some months, and it's going to increase in volume and complexity as we actually work through the next 12 or 13 months. There'll be local elections for the new authorities in North Yorkshire and what was Cumbria on the 5th of May this year. So people are standing for election in those will be elected for 5 years, not the usual 4. So they'll be spending the first year in effect a shadow authority because the districts and the county councils will remain. But the next 4 years will be just 4 years as a unitary councillor. The new authority, or new authorities, will come into being on the 1st of April 2023, so in 12-13 months' time. At that point, the former district councils and the area names will disappear. There will be no longer Craven, Richmondshire, Eden, South Lakeland, or any of the other ones. They'll all be scrapped. Which is something Annie had confirmed to me 3 or 4 days ago, because living in Richmondshire as I do, I know the name's got a history that goes back well beyond the 1974 local government reorganisation when it came into being as a district council. It goes back to I think we go back to 1723, but it is disappearing. How quickly it disappears out of popular usage is open to some doubt. Those of you that might be of a more elderly disposition might remember that some of the county names prior to 1974 are still used. Indeed, I'll come on to that a little later. So just in relation to North Yorkshire, the new council will be called North Yorkshire County Council, which is really helpful, and it will replace North Yorkshire County Council. I know that's confusing, and the 7 district councils. Well, what it shows is there's an authority confident in its own ability to continue and provide improved and increased services. So North Yorkshire County Council will become North Yorkshire County Council. The work that's going on at the moment to prepare for this is divided up into 15 work streams, and these are led by North Yorkshire County and some district council staff. These work streams are under a number of different themes, and they are locality, corporate governance, culture, leisure and sport, customers, devolution, economic development, finance, housing, human resources and organisational development, information, communication technology and digital, planning, property, regulatory services and emergency planning, and waste, highways, parking and the street scene. So 15 of those, but there are 4 in particular that are going to impact on us. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes just having a look at these, if I could, just to set the scene. So the first one is locality. What this means is in the new North Yorkshire County Council, it will be divided up into 6 area committees across North Yorkshire. Now, North Yorkshire is a huge county, as you'll be aware. So there's going to be some kind of devolved functions to these 6 area committees. They're going to be based on parliamentary constituencies. So for us, the 2 parliamentary constituencies of Skipton and Ripon, and Richmond bracket Yorks close bracket. And of course the park will only cover parts of those constituencies. The 2 MPs who represent those, Rishi Sunak and Julian Smith, represent areas outside of the Dales National Park that are still within their constituency. Within these 6 area committees, there will be 15 members, or the 15 new unitary members for the new authority. Now, I mention that because in total, there will be 90 new members in the new North Yorkshire Unitary Authority, covering 89 districts, and broken down into 6 area committees. And each of these areas will have 15 members each. And they will have a chair or a lead member. I understand on the grapevine and completely off the record that Mrs. Peacock might be in the frame for becoming the lead or chair of one of those areas. And I assume that would be, if I was guessing wildly, the one in the north of the park, which we currently call Richmondshire. There'll be a main office in each of the former districts. I think that's for A, continuity, and B, for the politics of the situation, to show people that there will be a continuation of service and a consistency of service delivery as we move into these new structures. And there'll be what are called place-based priorities. And what that seems to suggest is the area committees might have different priorities within them. So a different set of priorities over in the kind of Scarborough part of the park, potentially down the Bentham, not part of the park, part of the county, different priorities down in Skipton, Harrogate, etc. I think we'll have to see how that pans out, because I'm struggling really to work out how, if you've got a political party in power in Northallerton, how it's then going to deliver a range of potentially different priorities within different parts of the county. Those priorities, I'm told, will be decided and delivered through new partnerships that are going to be established in those 6 areas, bringing together the 15 new unitary councillors, the parish councils that operate in that area, local businesses and partners. And partners include the police, fire and the national park authorities. So we'll have to see how that kind of pans out. The second area that's kind of impacting on us is devolution. So what this is about is, for some 2-3 years now, there's been a conversation between the local authorities in North Yorkshire and the government about new powers and additional cash, substantial cash, being devolved down from Westminster and Whitehall down into the North Yorkshire region. I'll just give you a flavour of kind of what I'm talking about there. It goes across a range of different areas of work. So, for example, under transport, we're talking about £250 million being devolved every 5 years for integrated transport in the area. 52.5 million funding to deploy ultra-low emission public transport vehicles across the area. 50 million funding to roll out publicly available electricity charging points for vehicles. 35 million funding for bus services. A local flexibility over English National Concessionary Travel Scheme, which is an interesting one for me. We've had some debate for some time about whether the concessionary fees being aimed at the most affluent area or demographic of the population, those over 60, is actually appropriate, and whether it should be aimed at a younger demographic, I don't know, 16 to 30, say. But it looks like there'll be local flexibility on that matter. Another area would be digital. This is about devolving £520 million from the Department of Culture funding for fibre connectivity across the area. Another area would be housing. We're talking here about £45 million being devolved to accelerate the delivery of affordable homes in the area. £50 million funding to address the viability challenges by the infrastructure problems and enabling costs that we have, and that's particularly important in the national park. There'll be statutory spatial planning powers, land assembly and compulsory purchase powers. There'll be a mayor development corporation power, which I'll come on to in a moment. And because of where we are, there'll be a strategic partnership on housing with the MOD. Another area will be towns and city centres, so not really affecting us, but 240 million devolved for a mayoral towns fund. That's for the mayor to spend where he or she wishes, and 64 million specifically for York City. I'll come on to York's involvement in a moment, because the ones of you that have followed this will be aware that York are not part of the new unitary authority proposals. And then on skills, there's £10 million of revenue to fund a low carbon skills programme in the area. On business, there's the co-development of a Yorkshire tourism plan between York and North Yorkshire and Visit Britain to increase high value tourism. There's around £250 million for the Bio Yorkshire programme. There's a huge sums of money for a new energy programme, 100 million for a 5-year place-based low carbon housing refit programme, particularly important in this area. 25 million for a 5-year public building decarbonisation programme. £8 million of development funding for strategic low carbon energy generation projects. 42 million for low carbon energy generation demonstrator, wherever that is. And joint working with government to develop and deliver the area's route map to become a carbon negative region. Obviously, that fits quite well with our agenda. And lastly, again, I'm giving a flavour of what devolution means here. On natural capital, £2 million funding for the development of a natural capital investment plan, working with national park authorities, 10 million for natural capital innovation challenge fund, and some tier 2 and tier 3 ELM trials and joint working with DEFRA to co-design how ELM might work locally. And we're obviously very interested in that, following on the back of the work that's going on in land management on FIPL at the moment. I'll just carry on. So the devolution deal actually brings together the new North Yorkshire County Council unitary and the existing York Council unitary, and they'd become what's called a combined authority. So they'd still exist in their own right, but for the purposes of bringing this money in and these additional powers, they would come together, and they'd come together under a new elected mayor. The election to take place in May 2024, if this all goes to timetable. And the powers of the mayor will be substantial. So there'll be an interesting, for me, dynamic between the elected mayor and the leaders of York and North Yorkshire County Council and their cabinets and how they can actually work together. I think the reason for the mayoral model, which is something central government had insisted on, incidentally, it wasn't something that the local leaders were particularly keen on, is because central government see the mayoral model as having worked particularly well in different parts of the country, albeit in rather more urban environments. Just lastly on devolution, the local enterprise partnership, I know some of you do quite a bit of work with the LEP, will be embedded within the new combined authority, so it'll operate to both York and North Yorkshire. The third and fourth areas I just want to touch on are housing and planning. So there's a review taking place of housing, excuse me, of housing services across the 7 districts at the moment and how they're going to operate in the future. There are plans to merge the existing 8 planning services into one planning service for North Yorkshire. The North York Moors and wider MPAs are not part of that proposal. So in this new structure, there'll be one huge planning authority for North Yorkshire sitting alongside 2 relatively smaller ones in the Dales and the North York Moors. That'll be an interesting relationship, I suspect. There's work going on in this area to produce a new vision and framework for future development in the county to support 3 things: economic growth, more prosperous communities, and the protection of heritage assets. We need to see what that actually means in practice, I think. So that's a kind of conversation that we'll need to follow as the weeks and months go by. So that's the situation in North Yorkshire. I'll just pause and take a sip of this water. We'll move on to Cumbria. So differently in Cumbria, there isn't going to be one unitary authority for the county. There'll be 2. One of them will be called Cumberland, excuse me, which has returned to the pre-1974 name. It will encompass essentially the west of Cumbria and will pick up on the current districts of Carlisle, Allerdale and Copeland. This new council will have 46 members compared to the 90 in North Yorkshire. And the second council will be called Westmorland and Furness. So Westmorland's the former name of part of what is now Cumbria pre-74. Furness brings in Barrow. So the 3 authorities that are actually in this area are Barrow, South Lakeland and Eden. And there'll be 65 members in this new council. And this is the council that will that will cover part of the existing Yorkshire Dales National Park. So we will have a strong relationship with this particular authority and need to develop one. So similar to North Yorkshire, there'll be elections in May in Cumbria, and there'll be a shadow authority operating from May through to April 2023 when these 2 new authorities come into being. The work that's going on in Cumbria covers 3 themes: people, place and enabling services. So just to be clear, people's covering things like how are they going to deliver on adult services, children and families and public health in future arrangements. Place, things like waste, recycling, economic development, libraries and nuclear issues. I'm not sure I'd like the remit to be looking at that, but you know you're in Cumbria when you're dealing with nuclear issues. The last theme is enabling services. So that's the kind of things that you might expect, like digital, how that's going to work, service centres, the customer interface, legal, the HR, data and health and safety aspects. Sitting under these 3 themes are 8 work streams: finance and commercial, legal and democratic, IT, customer and digital, organisational development and HR, assets, strategic commissioning, and communication and engagement. It's worth noting that climate change is an issue or a theme. It's supposed to cut across all 8 of these work streams. So when the officers are looking at how these might operate in future unitary authority, they have to have regard for the targets that are already being established in Cumbria for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So when the elections have taken place in May, the authorities will be appointing their statutory officers. I think it's the same process in North Yorkshire, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I would assume it would be. For those of you that are not aware, the statutory officers are the 3 officers that these authorities have to employ as a matter of law. Now, they're the head of paid service, usually called the chief executive, the monitoring officer, and the chief financial services officer, sorry, chief financial officer, sometimes called the treasurer. We have those 3 in this organisation, as some of you will be aware. And then once the statutory officers are appointed, the senior teams will be appointed, and then the staff will follow on from that. So just to finish with one, so just to kind of summarise where we are then, there's obviously a huge amount of work going on across the 2 counties to prepare for the unitaries. It's touching us to a greater degree as the days and weeks and months go by, but we're not at the heart of it, I think it's fair to say. It means there's going to be some pretty obvious distraction from the day-to-day delivery of objectives and programmes within the local councils, whether they're districts or counties at the moment. And I think we just need to be aware of that. We're probably not going to be able to, demand the attention of officers working alongside us in the way that we had. I think we need to be sympathetic to that. It does mean, and we're going to need to look at this in some detail over the next 12 to 18 months, it does mean some very new partnerships. Do not make an assumption that what exists at the moment is going to exist into the future in relation to partnerships. We had a conversation in SMT yesterday about this, and there's going to be some significant change to our existing partnerships, and we'll need to look at that and look at what we think about that and how we might potentially influence it. And all that will mean there'll be new governance arrangements coming into place. And of course, this should be happening pretty much at the same time that the National Park Authority's new governance arrangements come into place. Just a final thing, really, a plea to staff to be aware that your colleagues in districts and counties are going through this situation. Be proactive where you can and helpful and understanding about the situation that they're in. It's obviously a difficult time in terms of people understanding what their future is going to be and how they might fit into the new structures. Okay, so happy to take any questions on that. I'll just stop that. If any colleagues have got those, you can put them into the chat or raise your hand. I should be able to see anything. Wow, it's so brilliant that I completely bamboozled you with all the points that were coming across. So that wasn't me putting my hand up inadvertently. No questions on that? No, this could be one of the shorter briefing sessions that we've had then. No, I'm not picking up anything. Are you? Am I missing something, Susan? Are you picking up anything? Can we have a list of the devolved funds? I think we can. The devolution deal applies simply to North Yorkshire at the moment, but I think we can put something out or a link to actually show that, to give you an idea of the kind of things that are currently in that bid, because it's quite interesting to look at those in terms of how it might impact on our work and how it might assist us in delivering some of that. So yeah, Robin, no problem with that. We can do that. Anyone else? No, right. Excellent. Well, thank you all for attending. As I said, just hang on while we close this off, because it'd be helpful if you could just fill in the survey. If any questions do occur to any individual members of staff, after this, I wish I'd raised that. Just pick up the phone and have a word with me about it, or drop me an email, and I'm sure I can give you information as we've got it at the moment. Okay then, colleagues, thanks very much for that, and I shall catch you soon. Take care.